All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard. A special episode here on November 24th because the news that a lot of Giants fans had been waiting for even prior to Brian Daboll's firing came down today. The firing of defensive coordinator Shane Bowen after another collapse in Detroit where the Giants lost. I was sitting there in Ford Field watching the horror of the Giants coughing up, giving away, surrendering what otherwise had been an exciting, electric, entertaining performance from Jameis Winston and Mike Kafka's Giants. But again, the same thing comes up. The Giants can't stop the run. As a team, they can't make critical plays on both sides of the ball, even though the offense was much better and has been much better under Mike Kafka and with Jameis Winston compared to Russell Wilson. The offense still, just like in some of Jackson Dart's really strong games where he wasn't able to make that one final play, like the interception in Denver as an example, you saw that in this game as well with Jameis Winston with an interception, inability to close in the red zone, turning the ball over on downs. But obviously, what we're here to talk about is Shane Bowen, how it happened, why now, why Charlie Bullen as the interim defensive coordinator, and taking your questions as always here from the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. Got off the plane today and actually spent a couple extra hours sitting in Newark Airport, grinding, writing a column, doing some reporting, texting, making some phone calls. Usually, if you're in the airport terminal as a reporter on a trip, it's when you're waiting to fly to a destination. But no rest for the weary on a Monday morning. The Giants really with a lot of Black Mondays, so to speak, right now as an NFL franchise, a different scapegoat every week or every other week right now as they roll or they drag towards the finish line of a 2-10 season. And what it is coming up to, of course, is that there are not many people, if any at all, left under Joe Shane, right? We've had a head coach fired. We've had a quarterback scapegoated and cut and released. We've had one defensive coordinator resign, a second defensive coordinator fired. We had an offensive coordinator demoted and then promoted and then given the interim title when the head coach got fired. So all these people have lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods, had to change addresses, change zip codes. All these people have been put in newspapers and on national shows as the reason why the Giants aren't where they're supposed to be. But now with Shane Bowen's firing, on the positive side from a Giants organization, Joe Shane and ownership perspective, and even on a Mike Kafka perspective, could it possibly give them the ability down the stretch to demonstrate that this was a problem of coaches not putting players in the right position? Sure, there's a possibility for that. Jackson Dart comes back. The quarterback looks good under Kafka, better under Kafka inside the pocket, stays healthy. The defense rounds into form and closes games with a new voice. Sure, all of that's possible. But what's more than likely is that because the Giants have something but not enough on the field and upstairs, they're going to find themselves in a position where the clock is going to run out, the hourglass, the sand is going to run through, and we're going to be left at the end of this season with ownership having to make a decision that, as I've reported before, they have not made finally yet, and that will be on the fate of general manager Joe Shane, and we will get to that shortly. As you guys load the questions into the queue, a reminder to everybody, if you purchase a super chat or a super sticker, your comment or question will be elevated to the top of the thread. Please support our sponsors as well. MyBookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Saloretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey, luxury menswear and tailoring. We'll run the codes on the bottom of the screen. You can get some great deals. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, especially if you're throwing some meat in the oven or on the grill during this Thanksgiving season, this Thanksgiving week. That is the place for you, hooksrub.com, with that code Talkin' Ball for, I think it's a 20% discount now. It's definitely 15, if not 20. Before we go into any more Giants talk, as you guys continue to fill up the queue with questions, I wanted to just pass along, it's so much sad news lately. I've talked to you guys about the passing of my mentor and friend, Larry Brooks, recently, the legendary Hall of Fame NHL columnist from the New York Post, and lost another friend this past weekend, a gentleman who I didn't have a relationship with, didn't have a friendship with. We didn't know each other personally until about 3 years ago or so. But my good friend, Pat Callahan, a respected voice in the Philadelphia sports community and the community at large, passed away after a short but tough battle with cancer recently. And Pat was a longtime host of This Week in Pro Football on 97.5 FM in Philly and on YouTube, with, what is it, Jacob Media, I think is how you pronounce it. And that was the show that he brought me on, This Week in Pro Football, over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, to talk Giants, talk Eagles, talk NFC East. And Pat just had such a passion for the game of football, for the Philadelphia Eagles in particular, and just for the thrill and the excitement and the fun of still talking about that game that we all loved to follow when we were kids, and now we're grateful enough to be able to talk about it for a living as adults, right? He had that kind of enthusiasm, and also was a morning talk show host on WPHT 1210 in Philly, father of two, beloved husband of wife Jean, and a respected member of the business community as a longtime executive with the DePaul Group. Rest in peace, the great Pat Callahan. We will miss you, Pat. Pat was one of those folks who also just had a good soul, called, just understood. We had like an understanding, a bond, and a friendship over this game and over this business. And especially at a time like now, you start thinking about your friends and your family, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the holiday season. And so, devastating losses. Good people. You always feel like you lose the good ones and the best ones. So rest in peace, Pat. And thank you all for listening to that. So let's kick off our conversation, our questions. As I said, thank you all very much for being here. Of course, haven't been logging a ton of midweek Talking Ball lives lately, but coming off of that game in Detroit, which was electric, but also terribly disappointing, and rolling right into the Monday morning news of Shane Bowen's firing and the naming of Charlie Bullen as the interim defensive coordinator. So much to talk about. I'm sure so many questions from you guys as well. All right, who are we starting with? Let's go to D Pat. D Pat, well, different login here, D. Let's check it out. D Pat says Connor Hughes blamed Shane Bowen, then wrote fans have unrealistic expectations considering what Joe Shane had to work with. Is Connor part of the Giants PR machine? Looks like G-Men asked for that tweet. Definitely one thing I don't do here is bash other reporters on the beat or covering the game in general. Connor is a good reporter, hardworking reporter for SNY, obviously covering the Giants and the Jets and the NFL, like Connor a lot. I would say what you're just describing there about unrealistic expectations considering what Joe Shane had to work with, I, of course, would disagree with that. And I would say that you definitely have to pick a side on some of those things and understanding and evaluating, is this a talented team with guys put in the wrong spots, positions to succeed? Or is this a team where regardless of the coach, it's only going to look so good, right? That could be head coach, that could be coordinator. I do think it's been a little bit of both. So in defense of what Connor is saying on both sides there, I do think it's wrong to say the coaches has been the problem and Shane doesn't deserve it. And it would be wrong to say only Shane deserved it, and it had nothing to do with the fact that Dable was the coach and Bowen was the defensive coordinator, things like that. I think everybody shares the blame. I would say, however, that pushing hard now in favor of Joe Shane obviously not being an issue and not being tethered to all of this is incorrect. And D, the reason I would say that, and this is actually a really good question to kick us off when it comes to where does blame lie, where does accountability lie, and also how do we decide who's involved in what, right? We don't know necessarily when a decision happens why it happened, who's involved. And that's why I asked Mike Kafka directly today. He initially said the decision to fire Shane Bowen was his. But I came back and I said, did you collaborate with Joe Shane, the general manager, on the decision to fire Bowen? And Kafka said, absolutely. All those decisions that go through the football side of it, I have conversations with Joe and make sure we're both on the same page and united on it. I then asked him if he also consulted Joe Shane on the decision to name Charlie Bullen, the outside linebackers coach, the interim defensive coordinator. Kafka said, yes, I did. Now listen to this part, folks. He says, quote, all those conversations that whether I'm thinking, and it happens throughout the week, any of these decisions on playtime, scheme, thoughts. We talked about some of the trick plays before the game when I was going to call those. So he had some anticipatory things. When he's up in the box, he can see how the flow of the game is going. But any of these decisions that come up, those are conversations that we had. We talked about them after the game, talked about them this morning, and are just making sure we make the right decision for the team. Now, what does that tell you? I believe, even though I have been stressing this on this podcast on Talking Ball and writing about it for the New York Daily News, there are some of you who are aware of this dynamic, and you may have drawn some of those conclusions yourself as well. But I think there's a lot of people who hear these quotes and listen to Mike Kafka describe the dynamic with him and the general manager and are either aghast or surprised or blown away by the level of involvement the general manager has with the coaching staff. What I would say is this is much more of like a baseball style alignment that, the baseball GM who has his hands in everything. And it always has been to an extent with Dable, Shane, as far as how they manage things throughout the weeks and how much Shane is involved more so than you would expect for a GM when it comes to game day decisions, personnel decisions, who's active, who's inactive, things like that. And I think what this should make clear to all of you is that Joe Shane is the one ultimately behind the decision of when to fire this defensive coordinator. And you and I and everyone else, we're going to sit here and we're going to agree. Shane Bowen, obviously this was coming. It feels overdue at this point. But my point in saying Shane is behind this is that he is the one making the decision at this point that it's time for another head to roll. Because think about it. Mike Kafka, first, he is not like he's a reserved guy, doesn't rock the boat, has kept his head down when he's been ostracized and displaced and sidelined by Dable and Shea Tierney and all these politics that have happened here. And he finally gets this interim head coaching job after interviewing for countless head coaching vacancies, not getting them. And he's still a young coach in his career. Your goal when you get a job like this as an interim, even though, yes, you're trying to fix things and win, the last thing you're thinking is, I'm going to get this job and I'm going to put on my resume immediately that I fired somebody a week or two into running the team. That is just not the idea that of an interim head coach in Mike Kafka. Like when you take over as an interim, you're trying to make it work. You're trying to show that you can work with everybody, that you're a team player, that you're collaborative, that you're a leader of that group, that you're not just going to point a finger. So this is not Mike Kafka going to Joe Shane and saying, Joe Shane, we need to fire this guy. And Joe saying, fine, I'm okay with it. If this is the other way around. This is more influence on the general manager's part. Yes, they talked about it. Of course, Kafka has a voice in it. But my point is, what we're looking at right now is a situation where the walls are coming down around the Giants. They have come down around them. And slowly, one by one, each person has been made to walk the plank. But we're getting to the time now where there is nobody remaining to point a finger. And what should be pointed out here about Bowen is that, like I said, Shane, good guy, was in over his head, but it's important to remember the context of how he got the job. He got the job because Daboll, with Shane and the rest of the Giants organization watching, ran a game on Wink Martindale, fired the Wilkins brothers to cut Martindale's legs out. Martindale resigns out of loyalty to them and also out of a lack of belief in what Daboll is doing and what the Giants are doing with that leadership group at that point. And the Giants have never recovered from losing Martindale and from that situation. And after that, Daboll ran kind of a scrambling defensive coordinator search. Several candidates ended up either saying no and taking another job or saying no while leveraging a promotion where they were. And so Bowen, who was their fourth choice, is at least according to my records, was their fourth choice in that search, ends up getting the job. And last season, it was disappointing results on that side of the ball. In fact, as bad as the offense was, and as bad as Brian Daboll's offense was when he took over play calling, John Mara was louder about calling out the defensive effort and inability to stop teams than he was about the offense at season's end. So as I reported in the New York Daily News today, and if you didn't read my column, then you'll hear it here first now, Shane and Daboll actually were going to fire Bowen after one season last January. So he was going to be one and done. But they had to test the waters first to make sure that if they were going to fire him, they could land their preferred candidate. And when they tested the waters, their preferred candidates wanted other jobs over this job. What I was told, according to a source, is that Joe Shane wanted to replace Bowen with Lou Anarumo. So he was the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator who eventually took the Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator job. And then Daboll, while Shane wanted Anarumo, Daboll wanted Matt Eberflus. That was his preferred candidate, the former Bears head coach, who instead took the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator position. So because their preferred candidates didn't want the job, they ran it back with Bowen. And so he was essentially a lame duck defensive coordinator. Now, he could have made it work to an extent that it all flipped around on its head in a positive way for him. It's not like that wasn't on the table at all, but it was unlikely, right? And once the collapses and the losses and the bad run defense continued to pile up, along with the effort issues that occurred last season that bled into this year, and then with Dexter Lawrence playing poorly, it was only going to be a matter of time, right? One clarification on the Bowen firing too. I know a lot of frustration about Dexter Lawrence not being on the field at the start of overtime for that touchdown run. Mike Kafka said essentially this was, so I've talked to him, talked to people with the team. This was not a case of we're rotating D lineman and Dexter Lawrence's turn. It's Dexter Lawrence's turn to be out. This was a situation where he pushed through the end of the fourth quarter through an injury. And Mike Kafka said he was, quote, in tears on the sideline because he was in so much pain. So they had him out. And so Kafka, even though he wouldn't reveal who told him, although I'm assuming it was someone with the medical staff, although I asked him, was it medical staff? Was it his position coach? Was it the defensive coordinator? Who told you that he couldn't play all the time? So I'm guessing is the medical staff, but I don't know that. But he said that the plan then became we're going to put him on a pitch count. And we're going to only use him on like key passing downs now. And so this was not Bowen saying, hey, let's just rotate Dexter Lawrence. But this made me think about two things related to Dex. One, like I said, Bowen was a lame duck DC, so it was unlikely he was going to keep his job after this season anyway. In fact, Dable, the belief of many is that the only reason Dable hadn't fired Bowen yet was because he was waiting until the end of the season to fire him to protect himself. Like to say, okay, this is the change I'm going to make, when he has to meet with ownership and Shane and talk about how to proceed and change things up. But I do think one unfortunate thing is that Lawrence was not prepared to play physically at the start of this season, has not been himself. And so when your best player on your defense isn't ready and doesn't play anywhere close to his top level, it's going to be hard either way. But the other thing is this. Think about what we're saying about the roster. Like Dexter Lawrence wasn't in for that play. Okay. Now, could that have been the reason why the Lions had a solid gain on first down? Maybe. But you take Dexter off the field, and that's the excuse for Jahmyr Gibbs going 69 yards untouched on the first play from scrimmage of overtime. Like, we're looking at players on the field in that moment that Joe Schoen has drafted, that Joe Schoen has signed, that are Joe Schoen guys. And these are players who are signed in that moment, or who are signed, drafted, and added, and supposedly developed and identified and targeted for these situations to be able to be playmakers. So this is a roster issue too. It is a significant roster problem when people are pointing to one player not being on the field when there's 11 defenders there and not a single person gets even a fingertip on the player with the ball in his hands with the game on the line, right? So that's coaching too. So Bowen, like I said, it was inevitable, but what are we talking about when it comes to the conversation about what the roster looks like and how much it has to do with what's going wrong on the field, right? Because what we saw in that moment on the field was the front for the defense was Abdul Carter, Joe Schoen draft pick, DJ Davidson, Joe Schoen draft pick, Roy Robertson Harris, Joe Schoen free agent, trade acquisition Brian Burns, Cordell Flott, Corey Black, both draft picks on the outside, Bobby Okereke, free agent signing, Drew Phillips, draft pick, Javon Holland, free agent signing, Dane Belton, draft pick, Swayze Bozeman, free agent signing. These are Joe Schoen's players. These are guys that were identified to be able to be difference makers by this general manager. So the blame doesn't stop at Bowen, but it certainly was overdue. The Denver game, obviously, the fact that everybody didn't lose their job there, as I reported the other day, that report by Nikki Gist on X about Mara wanting to fire Dable after Denver and being talked off the ledge, that was true. Sources have told me that was true. And, I credit Mara for feeling that way then. And he finished the job, fired him 3 weeks later. But it's amazing to me that Dable didn't just get fired right there, that Bowen didn't just get fired right there. That was the kind of game that gets people, that loses people jobs. D-Pat also says, Mike Vrabel is calling Bowen for inside intel for the G-Men and Pat's game. Yeah, probably. Good friends, Mike Vrabel and Shane Bowen. Shane Bowen was the defensive coordinator for Vrabel in Tennessee before he ended up with the Giants, and wouldn't be a surprise if he ends up back in New England with his guy, Vrabel. And for sure, as you note, they are playing each other in Foxborough next Monday night. I'll be there. Giants at Patriots, maybe Jackson Dart at Drake May. And yes, I'm sure that Vrabel will pick his friend's brain after he got fired. Joe says, I'm sure Vrabel needs every bit of inside info to beat one of the league's worst teams. Peterstown says, Kafka said I think I missed a super chat here. Laner, what's going on? Thank you for the super chat. Laner says, Pat, I beg you to please grill Joe Shane hard during the bye week presser. He needs to be held accountable for his sins. Mara hates being embarrassed. Laner, thanks for saying that. I intend to ask the, direct questions that need to be asked, the issues that need to be accounted for. I think what it really comes down to is how does Joe Shane and how do the Giants account for in year 4 being the kind of team that is okay being in some close games that they lose, right? What I don't want to hear in that press conference is excuses. What I don't want to hear is propaganda and contrived arguments that continue to lower the standard of the Giants franchise, right? Arguments like, well, we've had double-digit leads in these games, so obviously we're doing something right. We just have to finish it, but we're close. Or look at the offensive side of the ball, especially with Mike and Jackson here. We've essentially fixed the offense. The defense is the only problem, right? There are going to be a lot of ways that Shane can handle that. Not to mention, how does he weigh in on Brian Daboll's firing? What does he say about his involvement in that? What does he say about his standards for how long this is supposed to take, right? Because, of course, he's trying over the course of these 4 years to do the best that he can do to turn the Giants into a team that is going to win games that he and everybody in the organization can be proud of. He's doing what he thinks is going to be the right thing. But along the way, loses focus of priorities, reveals himself to have a lack of understanding of some critical components, including leadership. And I think that's what you're seeing is a lot of issues from Malik Neighbors lashing out and saying that it feels like they're trying to lose the game on purpose. Abdul Carter sleeping through a walkthrough. Players focused now, some of them more on individual accolades than anything else. These are all culture characteristics of a team that Joe Shane has built. And he has to answer for all of that. On top of Daniel Jones and what the Colts are doing, Saquon Barkley and what the Eagles did, Xavier McKinney and what he's done with the Packers. It's just all added up. All right, back into the queue. Thank you, Laner, for dropping the super chat. Reminder, if you ask a super chat or a super sticker, if you purchase one of those, I will jump to your comment or question immediately, and you'll jump to the top of the queue. Peterstown says, Kafka today said he talks to Joe Shane and the owners about play calling, players he wants to use, and about his 2-trick plays. Sounds like he needs permission to do what he wants. Not good. Exactly. That's people. I'm glad that Mike was so honest about the dynamic because it really shed light to people on how this works. D-Pat says Patriots may need the help. Actually, their offensive line is in shambles. Yeah, they're in. Christian McCaffrey gallops into the end zone for his first touchdown of the game. Niners go up 17-3 on the Carolina Panthers late in the third quarter. Yeah, you're right. Will Campbell, the left side of their line banged up in this last win over the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll be interested to see this game. If Jackson Dart plays, it'll be May versus Dart. If Jameis plays, we know it'll be entertaining and a lot of fun, and the vibes are high, at least on the offensive side of the ball, as Gunnar Olszewski said. The Patriots being one of the better teams in the league record-wise right now and playing like it. Yes, they're banged up, but with the way May is playing, Hunter Henry at tight ends, Stephon Diggs, Travion Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, and a tough and hard-nosed team, the way that Vrabel coaches every team that he coaches. I'll be really interested to see that game And can the Giants play that physical brand of football with New England? As a 2-10 team lacking the results to validate their play and any of their positives, coming off of another discouraging loss, getting punched in the gut, getting punched in the mouth. You have Abdul Carter liking the Giants team Instagram post that Bowen has been fired and Charlie Bullen has been restored as the interim defensive coordinator. Will the Giants rise up again? Yes, Goldie reflecting some of the Giants fans' excitement that Bowen is gone. Now we just need Shane gone so Giants can start from scratch, says Null. Ashley says, hate to see anyone lose their job, but Bowen had no imagination whatsoever on play calling. All of his play calls are straight up 4-man rush, no stunts, no schemes, no safety corner blitz. They were trying that late, but obviously the defense was not practiced enough on it, and they didn't have enough discipline to execute it at a high level, or frankly, the right enough players. Although this is a much more talented defense than they had in 2022, and the results are even worse. And just to go over some of those horrendous results. So the Giants right now, as of Shane Bowen's firing, the Giants are allowing the third most yards in football per game at 385 per game. They are allowing a league worst 157.2 rushing yards per game. And they are allowing a league worst, ready for this, 5.9 yards per carry. The second worst in the league is the Bills, allowing 5.3. So let me say that again. The Giants are allowing 5.9 rushing yards per carry to opposing rushers. That's worst in the league. And 157.2 rushing yards per game. That is worst in the league. Third worst in total yards allowed per game, 385. And on top of that, they're also allowing the third most points per game in the league as a team at 27.8. The Bengals are first or worst at 32.7, and the Cowboys are second, 28.5. The Giants nipping at their heels. And as we sit here right now on Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard here on the YouTube, PL on NFL is the handle. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Join the comment section. Purchase super chats and super stickers to support the channel and support our sponsors, Boom Chaga, MyBookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, and Salaretta for Men. And this is the quality or the lack of quality of play that the Giants have put on the field for far too long. Null says, has the organization started compiling potential candidates for head coach yet? Does the league rule not allow the Giants to start asking teams permission to interview? Right. So now would be the time, if they started interviews, it would be the time that you're interviewing somebody who's not working for a team. But what they will do, I would imagine, is you have those behind the scenes conversations, and yes, they're gathering their list of potential candidates. But the way you do it is, especially because Mike Kafka is coaching your team right now and is your interim head coach who has a chance to interview for the full-time job and potentially land it at the end of the season. Out of respect for him, I would think you were not doing actual interviews yet. There'd be a handful of like, hey, is Antonio Pierce going to interview just because he's available to, right? But I would think the way you would do that is just wait until when the season is over, and then you can get the Antonio Pierce ones. I'm just using his name as an example because he's not coaching right now. But that's just an example of where maybe you go and start early as you're lining the rest up that you've been putting your irons in the fire to develop. Deuce says Shane is running out of scapegoats. That's right. Sully says, do you think the new defensive coordinator's connection to the top 3 DCs in the league had something to do with it, or is it the Shane connection? Definitely the Joe Shane connection, a strong part of it. They worked together with the Miami Dolphins from 2012 to 2016 when Joe Shane was a scout and Charlie Bullen was an assistant, low-level assistant, moving on up. And so they're friends from that time. So Bullen is a Shane guy, for lack of a better term. Now, Charlie Bullen, nice enough guy. Obviously, Brian Burns, who has always been a very good player, has had an explosive career year under Bowen or under Bullen this season. So that's a feather in his cap. And I would also say, even though he's never been a defensive play caller before, there are no real other options on this staff that blow you away, right? Like Dre Patterson didn't even get an interview for the vacancy when Martindale left, and I believe might have been a play caller in college once, but was not good at it. And then Marquand Manuel has done it before, but in all honesty, and I don't mean this to, dump on Marquand Manuel in any way here, but he is your first year defensive backs coach, and your secondary has been horrendous. So yeah, I don't know how you go there. I think if you're looking at your defense and you're trying to get the rest of the defense to follow the guy, I understand how it lands on a guy like Bullen there. But it's definitely, like I said, Shane is pulling the strings. And so just as he was involved in the Bowen firing, he is involved in Bullen being the one getting named, and not just a coincidence that he happens to be his friend on the coaching staff. Now, I think on the flip side of that, when you look at Charlie Bullen, you say, okay, I can understand the rest of the defense can say, okay, this guy's been the one coaching Burns. Burns has had a great year. Thibodeau, when he's been healthy, has played a lot better this season than he did last year. Seems to be getting his game has been rounding more into form, even though the sacks aren't super high. Obviously, right now he's hurt with the shoulder, but maybe you can look at that way and say, look at what he's done for these guys. But on the flip side, even though Abdul Carter has had a fair amount of pressures as a rookie and as an outside edge rusher, his lack of contributions and results and sacks, we're talking about, this is the number 3 overall pick in the draft, and Bullen has not been able to get a ton out of him as a rookie and as the number 3 overall pick. So that is obviously disconcerting, right? So I think there's also, you look at the run stopping that is not happening, the inability to stop the run. And we know that the defensive line has been horrendous at it. And Dre Patterson has been unable to come up with an answer for anything up front. Not surprisingly either. That's been a consistent problem there. As Tet McMillan catches a 29-yard touchdown pass from Bryce Young. Looks like it's going to go to 17-10 late in the third. And the run, the run stopping. So obviously it starts with the D line, but on the edges as well. Think about it, how much success has happened with running to the edges of the Giants' defensive line as well. And that has not been something that Bullen in his position group, along with collaborating with Patterson and Bowen, has been able to fix either. So, there's no one really affiliated with this defense who you can look at and say, like, but it's not his fault, right? So, that's where we're at. Now, yes, he does have some connections to defensive coordinators around the league. You're going to find that with most coaches, right? Like there are parts of different coaching trees, but I think this is a combination of, it makes sense based on the options. It's also a combination of who can the defense look at and say, oh yeah, he's done a good job with this player and that player this year. And then finally it's Joe Shane, doing his friend a favor and installing one of his friends in a higher position. Did Kafka have zero trust in the DB's coach has called plays before? Well, like I said, I think Joe Shane was involved more in this. Like Mike Kafka can say it was his call, but I guess I would put it this way. I don't envision anything happening today that Joe Shane didn't sign off on and want to happen, is how I see it. But like I said, they scapegoated Jerome Henderson and Mike Trier last year, the defensive backs coach. They hired a new duo this year, Marquand Manuel and Jeff Burris, and their secondary has gotten worse. And so how do you just turn around and give those people, one of those guys like Marquand Manuel, the interim DC job? Like what has happened with the secondary to say that he's got to be the guy? I would endorse somebody being skeptical of that. JDJ says, hey, Pat, I know things won't change drastically, but do you think there will be any philosophy change in the defense, simply being more aggressive and disguising more of their looks with Bowen out? I think with Charlie Bullen being a first-time defensive coordinator or play calling defensive coordinator, I don't know what to expect. I think what you can expect is for Joe Shane to be even more involved in what that game plan looks like, for as much as he is able to, understand the X's and O's, which I think because he's not a coach by trade will be limited compared to what a coach has at their disposal. But certainly he's going to be involved, as Mike Kafka told you, he's involved in the playtime conversations, personnel, actives, game planning. So imagine he would be more involved in it now. Now that sounds a little scary, right? That would be the case. What will be the results of that? I think philosophically, Kafka understands. Think about the 2022 season when Martindale was here, where Kafka, as the offensive play caller, was running the ball a lot, complimenting Martindale's aggressive defense, but also aggressive didn't mean blitzing every play, but it did mean playing with that type of attitude and style on top of creative scheming and attacking protections with pressures at critical moments in new and interesting or unexpected ways. And I think that's probably the blueprint that Kafka is going to want to go to, like a way to shorten the game, to control the ball, to balance the team in the field, to keep them more even keeled, to give Jackson Dart a more even, let's say, balance as far as, throwing from the pocket, developing him as a quarterback, steady run game, commitment to the run, play actioning off of that, just like a tighter game plan. Usually when changes like this happen, the defense gets simpler, not more complex. Because if you change things on the fly or you try to change things drastically on the fly, put it this way, the Giants defense isn't playing well right now and has poor fundamentals and has no finish after working in a defense they've been in for a year and a half. If you rip it all up or if you change things drastically off of that, then how much slower your player is going to be playing as they're mentally trying to adjust to these new expectations or different calls and different usage, unfamiliar usage. Now, one thing I think you could look for, although not sure how many options they have remaining in this sense, you could look for more personnel decisions, lineup calls, benchings, things like that, significant personnel changes, maybe because Shane has his thumb even more on the scale. So that could be possible. But I definitely think you'll be looking at, here's the thing. Bowen got more aggressive late. It just still didn't work out. So I think you're going to see some of that. But again, I think if you don't do that with a sound plan and at the correct times, you're going to get burnt in a big way. I mean, look at Kelvin Shepard's defense in Detroit. you're looking at a defensive coordinator there who's still learning how to call games and who's still learning how to coach a defense. They've got some good games going on. They've got some good talent on that team. But some of the breakdowns they had, some of the calls they had in critical moments to leave Giants players wide open down the field, guys running into each other, leaving their responsibilities, freelancing. You don't want it to look like that because that's how the Giants' bad defense, that's how their bad to horrendous defense could go to, well, you know what? It's probably there anyway. But imagine the run defense we saw yesterday with the pass defense we saw at the end of the Denver game. That is, you could combine those two things, and that's what it could look like if Charlie Bullen changes things drastically and the defense takes a little bit to adjust. Null Void says, did you get a chance to ask Kafka about Malik's comment? Don't want to lose another LSU wide receiver in the future. Feels like he wants out already. Don't blame him. You know what? We dropped the ball there as a group of reporters. When we got to talk to Kafka on Zoom today, I had a lot of questions, and I asked, I think, 5 different questions, one after another, and Kafka answered all of them, which I appreciated. But the group of us did not ask about Malik. That was a failure on our part. And I think that you'll get some sort of answer on that on Wednesday when Mike Kafka talks to us, because it definitely still needs to be asked and addressed and is a serious concern. Because like I alluded to earlier, you had Malik asking if they're throwing games. You had Abdul Carter sleeping through a meeting. Now you have Abdul Carter liking Instagram posts saying that defensive coordinator has been fired in favor of his position coach. You need to get a handle on these things. You need to get your hands around it. Even the Cam Scattaboo flare up with WWE. There's just a lot of talk. There's a lot happening off the field. There's a lot of the Giants' young players being in the headlines and not for reasons on the football field. So they need to get their handle on that. And as I said last night, Talking Ball postgame live, I think that is a reminder of what they need to be looking for in their next head coach, is somebody who can crack down on that type of behavior and even thinking, right? Like Jameis Winston said something last night about it's not about his X's and O's as much as it's about energy and enthusiasm and belief. And what you just hit on there at the end of that comment, that it feels like he wants out already, that's an important point. And I thank you for making that, because that is what it sounds like when he says things like last year, it ain't the quarterback, and he's rolling his eyes and he's slumping his shoulders. And, it's the frustration with usage. It's the frustration with feeling like, and there's a lot of thinking like this on the team now. It's like, I'm doing my job. Why are we not winning? Like that's the conversation. That's the attitude a lot of the guys have. Even if they're fighting for each other during the game, which they are at times, or most of them are, privately, a lot of them at the moment have those thoughts in their heads of, I did my job today. Why didn't everybody else? Or I did my job on that play. Where were you? And so that is what comes across with Malik's comments. Obviously, he went even stronger than that. I mean, he was, calling out the interim head coach from, while he wasn't even at the stadium. Thank you, Null. That was a good question, and thanks for the super chat. Jacob, great to see you. He says, Pat, how are you? Smack that like and sub button for the best reporter on YouTube. Thank you so much for saying that, Jacob. Yes, good reminder, as always, hit those like buttons while we are live. That helps us drive more engagement and continue to build our community here on Talking Ball. And please subscribe. We have our subscriber-only chat activated, so only subscribers to our channel can ask questions on Talking Ball Live. Charlie has some history with Vance Joseph. Does that mean we can expect a lot of blitzing? I mean, I would be surprised if they came, like I said, I would be surprised if they came out and they're just blitzing all the time. Usually it gets simpler before it gets more complicated when you make a change like this. But definitely over the last few weeks, there was clearly an emphasis for Bowen to need to be more aggressive and blitz more. And I thought you saw that. But of course, the blitzing, like a game like in Detroit, they were getting some pressure or some push from their pass rush without blitzing at times. Their problem is their run defense, penalties at key times when it looks like they're about to get a stop, interior D-line play, technique, breakdowns at all levels. Like when one breakdown happens, it feels like everybody lets up on these big plays, tackling issues. Cordell Flott, who had a good game in coverage, basically shutting down Jamison Williams in Detroit. Jahmyr Gibbs didn't call him out by name, but he noted that on one of his big runs, he said one of their corners didn't even try to tackle me. He just tried to swipe at the ball. So I just ran right past him. Like those are, you can't, you don't want to hear stuff like that. Do I know what type of content will be on Giants Hard Knocks, like Dable's firing, et cetera? That's a really good question. I think they better have that chronicled if they're going to have cameras in the building when all of this stuff is going down. I mean, definitely the Giants had editorial control last time they were on any version of Hard Knocks, and the entire league, including them, complained and whined about how bad of a look it is. And now no one will do that off-season version ever again, when all they should know is that if you're not the Giants, you'll probably be fine. But this Hard Knocks, I noticed what you'll see is, so like when the Daily News sends me to Detroit, one of the things I can give you is what I wrote in the New York Daily News in my lead off of that game, is painting the picture and the scene of Theo Johnson grabbing his helmet, ripping it off, throwing it 20 yards into the end zone, dropping to his knees and pounding the turf with his fist. He's so upset about the loss. And I noticed as that was happening, I looked and there was a camera, like a big camera, a guy walking into the middle of the end zone, zooming it in from about 15 yards away into Theo Johnson and how he was acting. And I noticed in that moment, and I thought to myself, who is that videoing him? Because I know it's not Fox televising that right now. And I recognize that's probably going to be shown on Hard Knocks. You're probably going to see and hear Theo Johnson and other Giants reacting to a loss like that. And those are some of the things in real time as you're looking around. You're saying, "Oh, we'll have a deeper window into something like this." Into says, "Just supporting the show." Thank you, Into. I've got nothing. This team has me not caring anymore. I root for wins, watch the games, but I'm just blah. Have a good Thanksgiving, Pat. You too, Into. I totally understand. And that's what struck me about the post-game locker room yesterday is, Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger and the offensive linemen and, Jameis. The players were really broken up about this. Like, Gunnar Olszewski had a good comment. He basically said, how cool was that play? Talking about Bullseye. He goes, he basically said, like, it's a shame we didn't win. What was his exact quote? He said, it sucks we didn't win. That'd be an even cooler play. But he's right. And, it felt like they had that robbed from them. Like, imagine they win that game, beat the Detroit Lions, and that game is the highlight of it, right? The highlight of their win, of finally breaking out. The fact that they executed that play, they did it in the fourth quarter. They gained a 10-point lead at that time with it. Those are the kinds of plays and moments that win teams games. The fact that the Giants couldn't win the game off of that tremendous of an execution. And, I know analytics exist for a reason. and numbers matter, trends matter, but momentum is a real thing in sports. And the idea that they can create that kind of momentum and feeling for the team, for the offense, that they can put the Lions and their crowd on their heels like that and basically turn them dead silent inside a dome stadium. It's a really what an accomplishment. The fact that they can pull that off and not capitalize and not finish it, just ridiculous. And I'll tell you this, there's like almost a game at this point that we play every time the Giants have a lead. And it really started in earnest this season. I mean, you had the Dallas game, you had the Saints game, but during the Denver Broncos game, when they were up 19 points, I looked at one of the reporters next to me and I said, "Do the Giants win this game?" And the reporter looked back at me and said, "What do you mean?" Because the Giants were in full, total, absolute control of that game, deep into that game, right? I don't have to remind you guys. But as the Broncos came back and the Giants coughed it up, I kept looking over at the reporter next to me and we kept kind of making eye contact and going. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm not even sure I fully believed it when I asked that question and posed that question with the implicit answer. But I'm thinking now as I'm watching this, it is going to happen. Fast forward to Chicago, and another reporter says to me, "Do they win when they're up?" And I said, I'm being positive today. Jackson's playing well. The Bears look like they can't stop the Giants. I'm going with the Giants. Yes, they are. Reporter says, "You sure?" And I'm thinking, I just was the one who knew this was coming last time, but no, they're going to figure it out. I'm seeing some positives. I'm going to believe. Happens again. So yesterday in Detroit, I'm sitting there with other reporters from New York covering the team, and Jameis Winston does this incredible, stiff arm Heisman spin move, rips his leg out from Derek Barnes' hands, bounces into the end zone, finger rolls the ball into the air, does the dice roll celebration with Tyrone Tracy and Andrew Thomas. It's just an absolutely epic moment. I'm literally laughing out of entertainment at that point. Kind of lean back, clapping my hands like, "Jameis, incredible. Can't believe it. What an experience. What a moment." I'm also at that moment thinking about how in the world Russell Wilson started the season as the starting quarterback without Jameis being able to even compete for it. But then about 3 or 4 minutes later, as it quiets down, I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking to myself, that's the kind of play that wins you a game. I look over at one of the reporters next to me. I said, "Giants win this game?" And this reporter said, "Yeah, I think they do." And again, like I said, I had been that guy in Chicago after being the doubter in Denver. And there we are sitting as the Lions come back, as anything that goes wrong, does go wrong for the Giants. Murphy's Law when it comes to the New York Giants. But I'm there with you, man. Berg says, "How short is Joe Shane's leash now?" Well, I'll tell you this. And thank you for the super chat. It is short enough that I've had sources tell me he is feeling the heat. He's feeling the heat big time. Like we've seen in the past instances where, people on the outside, including people like myself, have felt like it's time for a firing. It's time for the general manager to go. It's time for the head coach to go. Change is coming. Maybe you have sources telling you that it's headed that way. And then you see Joe Shane acting like he knows he's safe. You hear rumblings then of how safe he actually is, that he's protected, why he is, and that the organization's evaluation of themselves is different from what reality is. And then it snaps it back to, well, This is going to drag on. Let's see how it goes. What I understand is that Joe Schoen knows that his job is on the line, is not definitely safe. He is helping run the search for the next head coach, helping create that list, helping get that underway. But my understanding is that the ownership situation and the ownership decision is one that is going to happen at the end of the year. So that will be in connection to, in conjunction with the search for a coach, and also their independent evaluation of the job Schoen has done. It'll be interesting to see if the Giants do get a few wins in the soft part of their schedule, whether the ownership group and families, for example, at the end of the season, the Giants play the Commanders, the Raiders, the Vikings, and the Cowboys. Let's say after starting 2-11, the Giants go 2-2 in that stretch. Are there really going to be people in the ownership that say, because we know Joe Schoen will be selling this, but will there be owners who say, okay, I can finally see it. We're on the right track because you won against, let's say, the Vikings and Raiders? Is that going to be a thing? Or will those results not fully matter? And what will matter about those games and what won't? If Jackson Dart plays in them, looks like he's developing well, how much that factors in versus if he plays poorly in those games. What's the difference between 3-1, 2-2, and 1-3 in that stretch? One thing I can say is that with Schoen feeling the heat and knowing that ownership has not made a final call on Schoen yet, I believe, this is, no one has told me, this is not a report, but I believe, given the amount of doubt, given the fact that Schoen feels like he's not 100% safe, and given the fact that I don't have faith in this team to win games, I think if they finish with, the 2, 3, 4 wins, I think he'll be out. Part of that is me having faith in John Mara and in the Giants to ultimately come to their senses of remembering, understanding what they're supposed to be, how to get there, and the fact that what Joe Schoen represents is not what they should be representing. And I have faith in that if the results, the trajectory, and the product doesn't change. And it's hard for it to change meaningfully with only a handful of weeks left. Dan says, do you see the Giants trading for a head coach? If so, who? Yeah, I saw that. I think Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk reported that. So, I mean, yeah, are there coaches around the NFL who could help the Giants if they traded for them? Of course there are. But let's go through who you would realistically say who they would target, right? There's Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. Don't know why those teams would trade those coaches. You have, I guess, if you're a Matt LaFleur fan with all of the rumors in Green Bay, you could make that argument. Obviously, Dan Campbell would be nice to have, but why would the Lions let him go? Dan Campbell does have the Giants history. In the NFC East, nobody I see there. Although Dan Quinn has been a guy that they've liked before, but are you making a trade in division? And obviously Washington has had problems of its own this year as well. In the AFC West, Harbaugh has been a guy that felt like a good fit before at times. I don't know if they would pursue him now. I mean, yeah, of course, everybody would love Andy Reid, but this is the thing about this exercise too is, yes, of course, Mike Tomlin or Andy Reid, if you traded for them and put them on the Giants, would help the team. Are those guys being traded? Are Are they wanting to be traded? Are they facilitating a trade? Are they coaching? How much longer is a guy like Andy Reid coaching? Right. So bringing up those things feels silly. But again, that, if Mike Tomlin doesn't want to coach in Pittsburgh anymore, everything changes. But, Tomlin in Pittsburgh, John Harbaugh, Baltimore. And I think that would probably be it, what I see in the NFL. I mean, Vrabel's a good coach, just got to New England, has a quarterback. So out of the names I just mentioned, who jumps out to me as the most realistic and interesting there? I guess LaFleur, based on the rumors and the noise around him. But I don't know if that's accomplishing what you're looking for in the head coach either, as far as the overall leadership of your team and coaching a young team and having to get your arms around it structure wise. Accelera with a $50 super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Accelera. Thank you. Super, super supportive. And, this is why I do it, because of passionate people like yourselves, bringing great questions and supporting our channel and making this possible. Really appreciate you. So Accelera says play calling, same story. They were running well, and with 3 minutes left in the fourth, they should have run it every down when they were next to the end zone. They don't know how to win. Ownership doesn't take the play calling seriously enough. Well, and Accelera, what you're describing there too is play calling. It's also situational football, right? It's also situational football, meaning what you just alluded to about taking time off the clock. Where are you on the field? What is the score? How does the play you call impact what the time on the clock is going to look like? What your probabilities are going to be of succeeding on this play, on creating a workable down and distance for the next play. It's not just about calling plays on Madden, right? And just picking something from a menu that you think is going to be cool and catch the defense off balance and create like a splash play all the time. It's about putting together a group of plays that are going to complement each other, that are going to get the linebackers to come downhill to open up something in the middle, that are going to change their eyes, the defender's eyes, pre-snap, post-snap. So what you're hitting on is not just the play call. It's not just, hey, what play do I want to run here? It's also about how does what I run here impact the game? Now, what I will say, Accelera, is it felt to me like Kafka was trying to stick with the run, but they were getting nothing out of it execution-wise in those clutch moments. Now, one thing that killed them, they had a play in the fourth quarter where they got Motor Singletary free out to the right side of the line. And he should have, and looked like he would have and was going to, get to the edge and get the first down. And he got basically outrun to the sideline and to the sticks. And that was a killer play. Like, you want to talk about whether running backs matter or not. Look at Jahmyr Gibbs' speed being something the Giants defense can't handle, while Devin Singletary's lack of speed costs them getting a first down and leads to a punt and Lions ball and ends up contributing to a fifth collapse this season in a game when the Giants led by 10 or more points. And so those are plays where it's not even about the play call. It's about not having the horses to get it done. And again, Devin Singletary, Joe Shane signing. He was supposed to be the easy, obvious layup replacement for Saquon Barkley in free agency. But let's take a look at some of the runs real quick. So late third quarter, Singletary for 6 yards, Singletary for 1 yard. and then they threw the ball a couple times. Then Tracy on 2nd and 3 runs to the left edge for -1. Tracy up the middle for 8, right tackle for 8, Singletary 3 yards running to the behind the left guard, and then the touchdown pass to Jameis. The Lions score quickly. Giants get the ball back. Jameis throws the interception. They force a Lions punt. Late in the 4th, the Giants with a 4-yard run, a 1-yard run, 30-yard pass, 4-yard run, incomplete, 3-yard run, 3 yards. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. So they were running it well late 3rd, early 4th. But then they come down to this drive and they sustained possession, right? They got all the way down to the 2. So what happened there in the red zone, they went at the 18, 1st and 10, Tracy went for 3 yards. Then he went left tackle for 11. Then 1st and goal at the 4, 2-yard run down to the 2. Then they throw the ball incomplete. Then on 3rd and 2, they ran the ball again for -4 yards. So on the goal line, they called 2 runs and 2 passes. And the runs went for a total of -2 yards. So 2 runs for -2 yards, and both passes intended for Theo Johnson went incomplete. And as Jameis said, Theo Johnson was open on that 2nd down play, just missed him. I hear what you're saying as far as wanting to keep the clock moving and control the game, because certainly if you're not scoring there, you also want the clock to keep running. But the 3rd down play especially was a play that, or the 2nd down play, I'm sorry. The 2nd down play, the pass to Theo Johnson out to the right that was incomplete, just a little wide. He was open there. And once they ran that ball for -4, you had to expect, guarantee that next play was going to be a pass. But that's what I think happened there too. I think that from my vantage point, watching that live and then looking back at this game script now, they weren't running it as effectively as they needed to. Like, even let's go to the last drive. They went incomplete. Then they ran the ball with Tracy for no gain, another incompletion. Then Jameis scrambled to keep it alive. 1st down, 14-yard pass to Theo Johnson. Then Singletary 5 yards, Singletary 2 yards. Jameis with a pass again, 6 yards for a 1st down on 3rd and 3. Then they go pass for 3. Deep right pass on 2nd and 7, incomplete, where he misses Wandale. Then Tracy up the middle for 2 yards on 3rd and 7. So they run the ball on 3rd and 7, only gets 2 yards. And then 4th and 5, Jameis gets sacked. So just really spotty results. I mean, you think about the Lions running the ball and the Giants running the ball. It's not like the Giants were calling fewer runs than the Lions were in those moments. The issue there is just that the Lions were hitting 45, 48, 69-yard runs, and the Giants were hitting 2, 5, 8, 6, -4. That's the difference. But Accelerate, what you're speaking about is so on point with where the Giants have struggled all season. And that is with their inability to properly understand how to manage the critical situation of games. And play calling is a huge part of that. Hope I did justice by your $50 super chat there. I really appreciate your support. Chris Spire says, my fear is we will win against 3 of the last 4 games after the bye, keep the GM, make interim coach the full-time coach, and nothing will change. Well, and Chris, to be fair to you, I'm sure as you were typing that, you're almost shaking your head thinking, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I know this is actually a possibility. And The reason is because you're absolutely on point with the fact that that would be a Giants type thing to do, right? React to some meaningless loss late in the season. I mean, how about last year, them retaining them because they were able to beat the Colts to avoid going winless at home all season? Like literally, you go winless at home and you lose that game, definitely the coach gets fired. Maybe not the GM too, but definitely the coach gets fired. And instead, at 3-14, you bring everybody back. Oh, the team's still fighting for him. The team's still responding, right? Joey B says, oh, and Chris, just to your point, I don't think Mike Kafka has a strong chance to win this job. There's obviously a chance, but based on what they are looking for and need as far as a head coach and a leader of the franchise and experience, I think is really what they obviously need. It's going to be an uphill battle for him. But of course, what he has going for him is his connection to the team, to the quarterback room, to Jackson Dart. And how will that evolve? And will Dart end results pick up? And will those trajectories continue on the up and up? And that is how Mike Kafka in the end would be able to walk in and say, I'm your guy. Joey B, what's up? Joey B says, when is everyone getting fired? What are some names you are hearing that are legit? Are we going to get a cigar night in before the end of the season? Hope so, Joey B. Hope so. On the cigar, when is everyone getting fired? I would think at the end of the season. I mean, right now the Giants keep dripping out firings like once every 2 weeks. So we'll see if that continues as the scapegoat pile continues to accumulate. But my understanding is that when Dable got fired, he told his staff that everybody was getting fired. Essentially, like, you guys are going to coach out the rest of the season, but you're all going to need to look for new jobs after this, right? Like that kind of idea. Mike Kafka obviously is going to be able to interview for the full-time job. But other than that, everyone's going to be looking for work. I mean, the Giants certainly could go to a Carmen Brasillo or to like one isolated coach here and there and say, hey, we'd love for you to continue to be a part of this on the next staff. And usually the way that happens is they recommend that coach to the new head coach as an interview. And of course, when ownership is backing a candidate like that, then they get the message usually and put them on the staff. But you have to be careful with that stuff too, right? Like that's how like a Jason Garrett ends up on a staff with the Joe Judge type thing, even though he wasn't an incumbent. So you also have to be careful of that. But that's just an example of there could be like a qualification to that type of thing. But that's what my understanding was Dable shared with people. Names that I'm hearing that are legit. Nothing new at this point, Joey B, from what we've talked about, but I think I feel stronger at the moment about them going with someone with experience. And if it's not experience, you can't just throw anything at the wall. Like a Clint Kubiak, I think, is somebody to keep an eye on from Seattle as a legitimate candidate. I shared with you guys from the beginning, like when everybody created their first list of potential replacements for Brian Dable, I posted that story for the New York Daily News, and that picture was a headshot of Lou Anarumo of the Indianapolis Colts. Lou Anarumo is a good coach, and he's gotten interviews elsewhere. He almost got the Cardinals job. He's coaching a defense for one of the best teams in the league, and he's also good friends with Joe Schoen. So you can expect him to be a strong candidate. I would expect him, if Schoen is involved, to be a finalist. Now, does that mean he ends up getting the job? There's be a lot of variables in that, but to me, Lou Anarumo is a name to continue to keep an eye on. A guy who creates structure, and then people with formal. But when I say experience, like Lou, Clint Kubiak, both guys with strong resumes in different ways, but neither of them with the experience that I started off with at the beginning that the Giants, I believe, understand they need. And so that's why I think Mike Florio's report rings as true. I mean, I trust his reporting, but that's why that rings as true to me, because that is the Giants canvassing all options, trying to find a way to essentially expand the pool of experienced head coaches who they could bring in to fix this. Joey B, you're the man. Franklin, thank you for the super sticker. Maria says, do you have any inside info on why Dable refused to promote Winston to quarterback 2 when it was obvious Wilson was done? Well, my vantage point, that was related to Joe Shane's involvement in the process and Dable's being stubborn as well. So Dable always thinking about the optics of things, trying to keep everybody on his side. How do I manage all those relationships and make sure that I'm doing everything in a calculated way so that I'm not making the wrong enemies and reading the room in that way, like kind of trying to be street smart about it. And so not screwing with that dynamic. Promises made to Russell Wilson clearly about what his role was going to be. But Joe Shane also a big believer in Russell Wilson, which is why they signed him. You know, of course, there were other options they went after: Matthew Stafford, Cam Ward trade up, Aaron Rodgers, etc. But, Joe Shane believed very strongly in Russell Wilson. And so they gave him the starting job. They gave it to him, handed it to him. And then they benched him, but then they still kept him propped up as the guy behind Jackson. And it's interesting you bring that up, Maria, because of course it then ended up costing them another game in Chicago, right? Where Russell Wilson goes in and can't get it done. So the reason is they clearly had made some promises to Russell Wilson about what his role was going to be here. And from the general manager on down, any competition in that regard with Jameis Winston was not only discouraged, it was not allowed. So good teams don't have that dynamic. Good teams don't have that dynamic. Maria, great question. But yeah, it always goes up to Shane. Jumping around here in the comments. Rams are a fine example of great draft picks, says Null. Joe Shane has been close for 4 years, says E-Man. Please ask Shane about the Russ debacle, says Deuce. I think we got another super chat. Franklin says, Shane's roster isn't the league's best by any means, but this team is in every game. It's kind of hard to pin all of this on Joe. Pat's reference. You're saying like the Patriots is what you're saying, I think, as an example of a team that can look a lot better just by getting a new coach. I think that's definitely what the Giants are going to try to sell here. I'm not somebody who's saying that the cupboard is completely bare here. Like I acknowledged last night on Talking Ball in Detroit how excited I was about the catches that Theo Johnson made in this game in Detroit. Wan'Dale Robinson obviously was thriving down the field. The offensive line was better in pass protection, and I liked the plan Mike Kafka used to keep the Lions pass rush at bay for Jameis Winston to push the ball down the field. But those positives were undone and undercut by continued inability to put capable players on the field to stop the run, to stop explosive plays, to get to the quarterback and bring down the quarterback when it matters most. And also, Franklin, it's not just about the players' talent or lack thereof on the field. It's also about their makeup, their ability to be resilient, to be fighters, to have a toughness that overcomes the will of the other team in this violent and grueling sport, and the leadership to drag the team out of that doubt and that place that they've been in so long. You can see the fight and the hurt in the eyes and hear it in the voices of guys like Theo Johnson after this game. But there's only so much each person can do. And really, when you look on the field and you see that Jahmyr Gibbs is the literal difference in the game, right? It's a reminder that talent is normally, poorly coached talent, of course, can falter. But when a team has some transcendent players on it who are elevated above what they're facing, that can completely turn a game, completely change a dynamic, completely flip a season. And the Giants don't have enough of those players. Brian Burns has made some of those types of plays this year. In previous seasons, Dexter Lawrence has made types of plays like that. Andrew Thomas can be that kind of player at left tackle. But the Giants don't have those players. Like I would ask you to name somebody on their roster who gives you the feeling that Jahmyr Gibbs gives a Lions fan. Now, certainly Malik Neighbors, Cam Scatterbo, Jackson Dart, those three guys all hurt at the moment, off the field. Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterbo done for the year. And Malik is the guy athletically, production-wise, who ideally continues to fill the role that we just talked about. And Scatterbo can contribute some of the character element and some of the production element. And Scatterbo does have that kind of attitude that you're looking for in a football player, right? Like just a guy with some snarl, some fight, the right kind of energy, the right kind of attitude, the right kind of screw loose, That's a positive. But all in all, the Giants don't have enough transcendent players on their roster. And the guys who were supposed to be that this season, one guy got hurt and done for the year and is now ripping the team on social media. And the other one didn't really enter the season ready to play physically. And and his coordinator just got fired. Also, to your point, if you want to reference the Patriots as an example of a team that can look one way one season with a similar roster and then a different way another, that's, are you guaranteed to get a coach like Mike Vrabel with an offensive coordinator like Josh McDaniels, right? That's a significant experience and gravitas that comes with their winning ways and their histories, right? And they're able to inject those types of qualities we were just talking about into a team. So not a given that you can flip it like that, but a good point, Franklin, a good point. Franklin says, every team has holes. Great coaching masks those holes. Go back to 2022 and look at the Giants roster, especially on defense. Coaching matters. No doubt. And that was a way worse roster than, like, as far as on paper, you look at the names that, let's say, Martindale's defense and Dable's offense had then versus the names they have now. So in that sense, that's an impressive job by that staff in 2022. But I think it's a little bit of both in the regard you just mentioned. Like, I agree with you that if Martindale or, Fangio or some other really good defensive coordinator was coaching the Giants this season, Abdul Carter's stats would look a lot better. They would have found a way to get him to the quarterback, to have him make impact plays, to put him in a better position. So, I agree that can happen, and it does happen with better staffs, no doubt. And the situational football that we were addressing earlier that the Giants are so poor at, when Accelera was asking about the play calling, that's a part of it too, right? handing the players an advantage that they don't even know they could gain by how you're calling the games. So all of that is very much football, Franklin. I don't disagree, but I do think that the high end stars, the Giants don't have those or enough of those. And they also just, how do I put this? They're still scrambling to figure out who to follow. Because this year, Joe Shane gave them essentially Russell Wilson to follow. That wasn't as constructive as they had hoped it would be. And then they pulled him out of the lineup as the guy that they had pointed in the right direction to say, everybody follow this guy. So the dynamic in the locker room and of the team is off. This has been great, guys. 90 minutes on Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard here on Monday night, November 24th. To recap, Shane Bowen fired as defensive coordinator, Charlie Bullen, the outside linebackers coach, installed as the interim. And we roll on with the Giants at 2-10. And here are the stats on what the Giants look like right now, because Franklin, I appreciate your viewpoint, but I just come back to the fact that what have the Giants become right now? They are 3-21 in their last 24. They are 5-24 in their last 29. In division, they are 5-17-1, 2-14 against the Eagles and Cowboys, and 20-42-1 overall in 4 seasons with Joe Shane running the team. So this idea that the Giants are close, the cupboard is not bare, there's talent on this team, why fire the general manager? I just don't understand. I don't understand. I get the idea behind wanting it to work out and trying to find slivers of optimism. And like I said, there are players and performances that I look at and say, hey, you can build on this for sure. But I don't see the rationale behind enabling a regime that has constantly gotten in its own way and is a fledgling operation with first timers that has essentially just made excuses for things rather than finding solutions for it. But that's my opinion. But I respect your opinion there, Franklin, and I thank you for participating and for paying into the chat. And it makes this a better, more lively conversation. Franklin adds, we've got to get away from the premise that you're either the Eagles with the best roster or the Titans with the worst roster. You can have a middle of the pack roster and win games. No. Well, I've said before, Franklin, too, I think you would agree with this because this is definitely part of what you're saying. Like when Dable when they collapsed in Denver, we had this conversation, and then it was worth continuing to have as they kept collapsing, losing in Chicago, lost his job. Definitely over the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, the Giants lost anywhere from 3 to 5 games that the coaching staff, it felt like, handed to the other team in a lot of ways, right? So I don't disagree that you could hand Joe Shane 3 to 4 more wins, maybe with a different franchise over the last couple of years or 3 years. Sure. But that's still a bad team. You give those handful of wins back. That's still a bad team. Yeah, that's where I come down. Is like I said, I see the point of a lot of other coaches. I feel like could have gotten a little bit more out of what we're watching right now. And I'm seeing a play made here, a play made there. So I that's valid. But you hand, let's say, let's split the difference and say, let's say you hand the Giants 4 more wins over the last 3 years. That's still a very bad team. Right. As E-Man Perry says, yeah, but you have to win, all caps, the games. Win. This is the thing in the NFL too. Everybody plays close games all the time in the NFL. Like the Seahawks beat the Titans by 6 yesterday. Whether you win a close game, lose a close game, all that matters is the result. Unfortunately, that's all that matters in a league that pro sports is built on the business of entertainment and trying to create parity so that every franchise, every city, every fan base thinks for as long as possible that they have a chance. And so it's designed that way from the way that the draft goes in reverse order, right? And the schedule rotation and all of that. It's designed to create parity. So you're going to be in close games, right? That kind of thing. You need to win them. Grizzly says when the players were calling Dable Dabes, I knew he wasn't the right coach. Franklin says, but you can't say that Patriots went from 3 wins to 10 to 12 wins in the first 12 games. No, I'm saying that is a potential that is a potential outcome, but not a guarantee is what I'm saying. Go G's with a $10 super sticker. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. He says, all of this negative talk, what is your fondest memory of covering the Giants? Good question. My fondest memory of covering the Giants. I think I really enjoyed when Benny Fowler, my good friend now, was on the team. He was a really down-to-earth person to talk to. We talked a lot of basketball. I did a story on him, talked to his good friend from growing up, Draymond Green. You know, anytime you do a story like that takes you outside the locker room and crosses certain boundaries, or it's a little bit unorthodox or different and it's unique and it's not what everybody else is doing, I enjoy that. And I enjoy meeting good people and having that good constructive back and forth. So that was, what was that, 2019, 18, 19? Also, obviously, the playoff win in Minnesota was amazing. Not just them winning, but also the atmosphere. It's one of the best stadiums in the league. And then that day there was kind of dueling statements, not dueling, but like John Mara told, I think Ian O'Connor of the Post at the time said, we're back. And then Steve Tisch had a statement where he essentially said, this is exciting. I'm happy about it, but we have more work to do, type of thing. And their locker room was pretty turned up, to say the least. So I'm not in winning locker rooms enough. And winning locker rooms are great locker rooms to be in, let me tell you. Everything's different. Guys are talking. Guys are feeling themselves. Guys want to tell you about the inner workings of plays. You know, very rare that you have a loss like yesterday where a player like Gunnar Olszewski is still able to rave kind of and bask in the glow of this amazing play. You know, it doesn't usually happen like that. I think generally what I usually love is the road trips, like the memorable road trips is what always sticks with me. Any Dallas trip is always a lot of fun. They take care of the media there. It's a great place to watch a game. The atmosphere is excellent. Dak is a pleasure to watch. Their offense is always explosive and always kind of airs the ball out when they play the Giants. And of course, you know, what I have to mention is Odell and Saquon. Watching players of that magnitude. So I was just talking about the need to have A-listers, the need to have stars, and getting a chance to watch Odell when he's playing at his top level and Saquon hurdling guys, jumping over a Chicago Bears defender, the special plays that he made and covering those teams. I think that when I first covered the Giants and Odell was here, there was a lot to Odell, right? There was the on the field, there was the off the field, there was the excitement, there was the distraction, there was the contract, there was the criticism of Eli, there was, you know, how explosive and dynamic he was on the field, and there was the catch before I got here. And at the time, I recognized how good he was, but I didn't recognize how much New York and how much the Giants and how much everyone would miss him when he until he was gone. Once he left, once he was no longer a part of the Giants, it was clear to me that guys like that are rare. Talents like that, personalities like that, magnetic personalities and presences in a locker room and on a team, they're rare. And as special as all of those professional athletes are, it's that much more rare on top of all of those guys. That international trip, I wouldn't say fondest memory, but very interesting memory. When all the Eli Apple stuff, when his mom was weighing in and writing and criticizing ownership, and that was a very tense time, let's say. Franklin, I see your point, and thanks for bringing that to this. We just agree to disagree. If we get Mike McCarthy, who would be his defensive coordinator? Don't know that. Franklin says, Pat's the best in the business, just like debating him. Disagree on Shane, but the team isn't very good at the end of the day. Franklin, love it. Grizzly Season says, when you're not winning for decades, how many good stories can you have? It's tough, but we're getting close to getting this right. I will always believe in a better day, but this is our therapy session. No, you're actually right about, as I sit here and think about fondest memories of the Giants, my mind almost went right to the Rangers when I covered hockey before this, because I only covered hockey for 5 years. I've covered football for 10. But when you think about fond memories, warm experiences, times that you wish you could put yourself right back into and go right back in a time machine, I think of the New York Rangers going to 3 Eastern Conference Finals and 1 Stanley Cup final in 5 years when I was on the beat, All right, guys, this has been awesome. We're almost on an hour and 45 minutes. Going to wrap it up here. Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard on Monday, November 24th. Brought to you by MyBookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, and Sal Loretta for Men. As you see on the bottom of the screen, please support our sponsors with these discount codes. MyBookie for all your sports betting. Leonard, Leonard is the code. Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Talking Ball 25 has a lot of health benefits. Go check it out, boomchaga.com. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices for grilling and seasoning and rubbing all of the meat during the Thanksgiving and holiday and Christmas season. The code at hooksrub.com is Talking Ball for your discount. Get some great merch and great product today. Richard says, thanks. You got it, Richard. Thank you, especially to all the super chatters. Laner, Null, Into, Bergs, Dan, Accelera. Thank you so much for that huge support. Chris, Joey B, Franklin with a bunch down the stretch, and Maria and GOGZ. Guys, this has been an excellent show, an excellent time with all of you. Oh, and look, we have Hooks Rub in the chat, says, hey, email subs. Black Friday starts Wednesday. Let's go. So Black Friday deals at Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, hooksrub.com. Talking Ball is the code. Have a happy Thanksgiving, Pat and chat, says Hooks. Thank you. Grizzly says, love this show, Pat. You're doing great. Thank you, Grizzly. Thank you, everybody. If I don't talk to you guys before Thanksgiving, and I expect that I will not, at least on this format, but please follow along for the latest on the Giants, on Jackson Dart, and whether he gets cleared, on what everything's looking like going into their game against New England. But have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy it. Spend time with your family and your loved ones. And as I said at the start of this show, rest in peace, Pat Callahan, Patty boy. Love you, buddy. Going to miss you. All the best. Take care, guys.